Imagine a city 10 times the size of Stockholm. Now imagine that city has a GDP 3 times the size of Stockholm. Now imagine that city has a super efficient domestic and international transport network. Now imagine 20 of those cities all working together. This is the reality of China today, and it's what's happening right now. And it's not stopping, it's continuing to grow. Now, how is it continuing to grow? By creating a level of efficiency at an unprecedented rate, moving people and goods, reclaiming and recovering time and productivity. Now, why is this happening? This is happening to create a supercharged engine for export trade. Now, this is the Belton Road Initiative, and it's complemented by other very powerful Chinese ideas, such as the China's 13th Five-Year Plan and the Greater Bay Initiative. Now, the Belton Road Initiative is a 21st century game changer, in the same way that New York Metro or the London Underground permanently rewired those cities for the better. In the same way, in 1936, Cathay Pacific took the first flight from Hong Kong to London, taking 11 days and 4 stops, but opening up Asia in a way that hadn't been done before. So the Belt and Road Initiative will rewire China and beyond. 50. That is the number of large international airports that China is planned to build by 2020. And we anticipate from our research, every one of those airports is going to be of a margin of 400,000 square meters, a capacity of 40 million people. And they're delivering. This is happening at an average rate of delivery of 10 of those a year. And that's going to lead on, we believe, beyond the 2020 plan, all the way up to 2030 to the China Airport Master Plan. Why are we sure this is going to happen? Why? Because this is about policy becoming reality. Now, the 5-year plans are an incredibly powerful tool for China. They're the government's social and economic development plan. There's 13 of them running way back. We're up to the 13th at the moment, and from the 11th 5-year plan, airports have featured very heavily. And China loves its 5-year plans, so this is something that complements the Belt and Road Initiative. And how am I so sure that this is going to happen? There's overwhelming evidence. It's staggering that 75% of China's current 200 airports are already subsidized by the government on international routes in line with the Belt and Road Initiative. So this isn't even about a business model. This is about supporting the Belt and Road Initiative. And even though China's military commands the airspace all over China, and the high-speed rail network was originally set up to compete and alleviate the pressures on China's aviation, it actually didn't happen. High-speed rail and aviation collectively worked in symbology to actually work together, to grow together. So let's address the elephant in the room. I know there's people out there who will say it's just too hard to win work in China. To them, I say, get back in the game and get back in right now. There's more work than one company or even a handful of companies can handle, but do it with smart persistence. There's the absolutely stunning airport by Zaha that Cristiano has talked about in Beijing. There's the extremely intelligent and elegant airport by Corgan. I know Francis is in the audience as well. That's remarkably good. There's the new satellite concourse by Aedas at the bottom left. We're doing that with a local LDI. And the bottom right, we have the Hong Kong International Third Runway Project. That's a massive team of Aedas, ACOM, OTC, Aviation Planners, Leslie Jones on the retail planning. So you can do it, but you have to do it with smart persistence. Okay, the Belton Road Initiative, it's just a staggering idea. It's almost unimaginable in its aspirations. 60 countries are identified, a third of the world's economy, half the world's population. You are going to be affected by this. So it's about time that everybody understood it and engaged with it creatively. So, what has driven China to undertake such a huge concept? Okay, well, let's get to some facts. We know that China's growth is slowing down. We know there's an overcapacity of domestic production. So we say, China, why don't you just slow down? That's not in China's nature, and it never will be. So what it's done, it's targeted the emerging countries and markets, and it's redirected its domestic capacity and capital for regional infrastructure developments. Thereby, it's improving trade relations with all its neighbors near and far. Okay, now, this is essentially rebranding history, right back to the Han Dynasty. But what it's essentially doing is looking for synergies between nations for export trade. It's moving east to west across. And just to make things more complicated, the actual maritime Silk Road is not a road, that's the sea route. And the Silk Road Economic Belt is the land route. Now, there are many branches and permutations of this. I've kind of given you the poster child map at the moment. But you can see it really spreads over the majority of the world that it represents. Okay, so how is China gearing up to cope? Well, financially, it's expected there'll be outward investments of over 120 billion US a year. And it's already established 3 new financial institutions that are seeded with lots of money to help support this. And also you have the 2 China policy banks as well. So you have this really great financial network already set up. Now, remember I talked about the 13 5-year plans? Now, this is really interesting, that despite the airport growth being identified within the 5-year plans, there are 2 key components that come out of the 13th 5-year plan. City clusters, to develop them as a spatial strategy and to rapidly expand the already large high-speed rail network. But what really is this about? What's the real message? This is about focusing the workforce to get it ready to be a super engine for export trade. Now, let's first of all talk about the city clusters. Again, this is colossal areas we're talking about. 40% of China's population, over half the China economy, and 11% of Chinese area. Now you can see there's essentially 4 big coastal areas: the Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei at 110, the Yangtze at 150, Yangtze River Middle at 120, Chengdu, Chongqing, 98 million towards the west. And that's interesting. The Pearl River Delta, 58 million, relatively small, but extremely significant, as I'm going to explain now. So first of all, China's identified how it could link things together. And we're starting to see a grid already here. 2 horizontal corridors, 3 vertical corridors, road and route links. And why are they doing it? This is about synergies between areas. This is about creating efficiencies of trade, and this is about also serving larger markets with more focused businesses. So this is there, okay? This is just drawing lines on paper. Those cities exist, but it's also tied into the clusters. So you have your first grid. Now you have your high-speed rail network grid. It is the largest high-speed rail network in the world right now at 19,000 kilometers. But insatiable appetite. There are plans to be 30,000 kilometers by 2030. And what you see in there is my best attempt with the information that's available in public, with the 8 horizontal axes and 8 vertical axes. Again, overlay on that corridor grid. So we're starting to see layers on layers building that super engine for trade. And now we get into the meat of it. The final piece of puzzle, the airport clusters identified in the 5-year plans. Currently, there are 3 main clusters. At the top, there's the Beijing-Tianjin cluster. That's 9 airports at 125 million. There's Yangtze River Delta, 16 airports at 186. And now, you see there, remember we said the Pearl River Delta was 58 million, but only with 6 airports, it's 185 million passengers per annum. I mean, this is colossal. So the Pearl River Delta is a very, very special area. And if you look at the bottom there, you'll see all the clusters of the little green dots of existing airports. And I'm going to drill into that a little bit more. We're going to look in that Pearl River Delta in a little bit more detail. Now, you also look, again, with the 5-year plan, what has been completed recently? What are the projects? Well, we've got airports like Kunming, Chengdu, Chongqing, Xi'an, Urumqi. Now, guess where they are? They're exactly where that city cluster's been identified to the west. So we anticipate there'll be another 4th main super airport cluster around towards the west. And they're put together to build on the synergies of trade. And I'm going to demonstrate, looking into the Pearl River Delta, how actually that's happening in that region of the world. So we're going to zoom in now to another initiative. This is called the Greater Bay Initiative. And what it does is it takes that small cluster there and starts to look at synergies. So you see the map at the top, the red dot. We're in the lower corner now of that little Pearl River Delta. Now, this is a relatively new idea. Although it's been banging around Asia for about the past 10 years, it's become a public initiative in March 2017. 11 cities, 56,000 square kilometers, 300 times the size of Stockholm. With 67 million, 5% of the national population, and actually greater than the population of the Tokyo metropolitan area of 44 million, which is its nearest comparable idea. So this is a colossal idea in a corner of China, in a corner of that province, creating a GDP of 1.4 trillion. That's 12% of the national economy, and that's comparable to Canada. So this is a huge, huge idea. So is it doing the same thing on a nationwide level? Is it happening at a regional level? Well, I'm going to say the answer is yes, it really is. So let's start with the roads. Okay, you see the big Bay Area here at the bottom. There are 2 very, very big engineering projects going on at the moment. There's the Hong Kong Shuhang Macau Bridge, the lower blue dot, and that takes away the journey. Having spent 10 hours driving around the bay, you now can cross it in 1. There's future plans with the purple line to build a new Shenzhen Zhongshan bridge. So again, building that connectivity up. Then the red line, routing through the bigger provinces of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Dongguan, Guangzhou. There's a new high-speed rail that branches out to the neighboring provinces, again looking at synergies together. And the airports are there, and the airports are doing their job just the same. We call it the 5+2. 5 mainland China airports, 2 airports being Hong Kong and Macau. Overseas mainland China tourists tripled in a decade to 120 million in 2016, and 185 million handled by all of those airports together in 2016. They account for 400 million domestic and foreign tourists in 2016, creating a revenue of 170 billion. This is potentially the world's biggest market for aviation services, with a projected 223 million people by 2020. So if you look at the airports, now this is interesting, you have your main ones, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. Huzhou, that's an interesting one. That was one of China's first airports, opened and actually then closed down. And now it's looking to be reanimated, regenerated to tie in with this Greater Bay Initiative. Foshan, Much needed. That's now on the planning board. So there's another good project that's going to happen soon. Zhuhai, Macau. Now, Zhuhai, that's an interesting one. There's a lot of synergies going on there, a lot of clever ones that I'll explain in a little while. Okay, so we're going to look at the 3 biggest airports in that region. Hong Kong International Airport. It's been doing really well. Its growth is 2.9% on the year. The Midfield Concourse in the bottom left, which was talked about last year, that opened, adding another 10 million capacity. That's already at that capacity. The construction of the 3rd runway concourse has started in commensurate with that, giving an overall capacity to 100 million passengers per annum by 2024. A very mature business model, I think, there. Now let's cross over into China, the next biggest, Guangzhou. Now that's been doing really well. Its growth's 8.2% on the year in 2016. It's got a new terminal opening in the 2nd quarter of 2018, handling 45 million passengers an annum. But even that's now in the insatiable appetite. That's got plans for 2 new runways, the 4th and 5th, and a new Terminal 3 planned for 2022. Now, anticipate that to be one of the bigger ones. So you're probably looking at over 500,000 square meters, 50 million pax plus. So that's something that all of you out there should get your minds around positioning yourself for. Shenzhen, the iconic Fuxas building. That's done quite well in its growth, 5.6% on the year. Terminal 3 opened in 2013, the Fuxas one, and it's already just 3 million people per annum short of its 45 million capacity. They've started construction of they will start construction very shortly of the new satellite concourse designed by Aedas this year, and they're already planning for a Terminal 4 and a 3rd runway again there. So that's going to be a massive, massive terminal. So keep your eyes out for that. Get involved. That's a really good opportunity. Now, this is a really great story. Zhuhai International Airport, tiny amount of passengers last year, only 6.1 million. But look at the growth, 30.2%. And it is ironically, although it looks quite dinky up there, it was actually China's biggest airport when it opened in 1995. And capacity was 35 million. So it's never got even close to that. But there's a good story to this. Hong Kong Airport's got ahead of the game. It's looking at those synergies. It's picking up on the Great Bay Area initiative. It's looking at positioning itself for export trade. It has a 55% stake now in Zhuhai Airport. Potentially, we could call it Hong Kong's 4th runway to create synergies between passenger and cargo transfer. Now, do you remember I told you about the bridge that connects Hong Kong to Zhuhai? I mean, that's perfect. It's just set up there. Hong Kong is phenomenally busy. 1,100 flights a day, but only 70 stands for business jets. And that's getting quite pressured in China. So Zhuhai has the potential for business jets to land there and offload passengers directly. With the bridge link, you can be in Hong Kong within an hour and a bit. A helicopter ride, you can be there in 20 minutes. And not only that, I think Zhuhai Airport and the Hong Kong International Airport have been really smart. They're increasing the air cargo logistic park by over 250,000 square meters. So they're looking at those synergies. They're building on those synergies for export trade. So it is really happening. Okay, so now I'm going to just move into looking at a corner of a corner of a corner. So Zhuhai is in the bottom left, and you see the HCMB, Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge, the border crossing facility. That link down there is where the bridge is going to go. But is Hong Kong playing its part in the game? Is it building its network grid of road and rail and aviation? Well, let's take a look. Okay, the first project is the rather wonderful passenger clearance building designed by Aedas in collaboration with Richard Rogers, AECOM, and Bureau Hapol. Now, this is a beautiful building which will speed the transition across the borders on the bridge. So it's a very important part of that puzzle, creating that super engine for trade. Now, in an environment where you are having to construct these 10, even the 10 international airports here and all the other infrastructure of road and rail, you have to box smart. Now, with Richard Rogers and Bureau and AECOM, we've developed fast-track prefabrication at almost an unprecedented scale for southern China. These components, each of those is built complete with slats, lights, smoke detectors, antennas, everything. The gutters are on the roof. They're barged down from China at an incredibly good high-end level of manufacture and strand jacked up. So looking, the new engineering creative at the moment in China, it's not about just complex forms. I think Cristiano was extremely pertinent earlier today when he said it's about understanding your construction market and strand jacking, constructability. That's the new sexy. You know, building stuff smart is really the new creative in China. And it was really great to see, even with the complex geometries of Beijing Airport, that the videos were showing strand jacking there, not just the old craning in. Very, very clever, very smart. The express rail link, we're doing our part with the high-speed rail. This is a very large new railway station, 380,000 square meters, completed this year. This will form a proper gateway to Hong Kong, into China, and all the way up to Beijing, a real new icon of that interconnectivity, that new super engine for trade. The Shenzhen Airport, this is the new satellite I told you about that will be under construction soon, designed by Aedas. This has got a capacity of 22 million passengers per annum, but even that is just a stepping stone, as I told you, because there's a new massive terminal on the way. Designed, again, now that the taste and the intelligence in the China market are increasing rapidly, that's the idea that it was designed around high-end retail and experiential design is really important in how you approach the design of China airports. And then off to Hong Kong International Airport. The lovely midfield concourse finished in 2015, designed by Aedas with Arabs and Motts and OTC. That has an area of 100,000 square meters, capacity of 10 million passengers per annum, but that's at capacity already. It's like this insatiable force going. There's so much work to be had. And of course, then there's the Hong Kong International Airport third runway concourse. This will increase the capacity by 30 million passengers per annum, complete in 2024. And that's a very exciting place to be and involved with at the moment. So, what I'm going to say to you is, okay, what do you take away from this talk? Well, I'd like you to take away 4 things. There's a game changer in China happening right now of historic proportions. It's all about moving people and goods efficiently at a massive scale. It's about China creating a super engine for export trade. But the 4th one, more importantly, there's a role for all of you, and with smart persistence. And if you'd like to know more, then just drop me an email. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Max.